1851, New York City officials presented a citation to the Erie Railroad. Resolved that we hail the completion of this gigantic and stupendous work as emphatically the work of the age. Impressive words for a method of transportation still in its adolescence. For the railroad, however, maturity lay ahead. There was a nation to build and a nation to bind. After the 1840s, railroads experienced phenomenal growth. Rail lines had tied together the eastern coastal cities. Now they touched the western waters of Lake Erie and the Ohio and Tennessee rivers, rivers that flowed into the Mississippi. Railroad schedules were forcing people to change their concept of time. On the Pennsylvania Railroad, it took 15 hours to get from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh. By stagecoach, the same journey took 6 days. Past the Alleghenies and past the Appalachians lay America's heartland. The prairie, a vast domain stretching for miles. But the tough prairie sod stuck like glue to the iron plows of the first settlers. Then, in 1837, an Illinois blacksmith named John Deere discovered that plows made with steel blades would cut and turn over the rich clay soil. And Cyrus McCormick's new invention, the mechanical reaper, multiplied harvests. Windmills took advantage of the strong prairie winds to pump water and run machines. Now, settlers began to carve out homesteads. In Europe, political unrest. In Ireland, a potato famine. Refugees seeking a new life in a new land came to America. Some took their chances and bought prairie farms. Others became tenant farmers for Western landowners. And in this wilderness, devoid of roads and large rivers, iron tentacles began to spread everywhere. They were the vital link that got the goods to market. Because of their speed and hauling capacity, railroads could move perishable products like milk and fruit, or carry heavy raw materials and manufactured goods between eastern cities and inland settlements. And in the wake of this rail traffic, civilization followed. Railroad towns began to spring up all over. Most had high hopes of someday becoming a major rail junction, like Atlanta or Chattanooga. But most, like Sturgis, Michigan, ended up a whistle stop. In 1850, the federal government gave the Illinois Central Railroad alternate sections of land adjacent to its right-of-way. This land was then sold to settlers. 6 years later, with 700 miles of track, the Illinois Central was the longest railroad in the world. Between 1850 and 1860, about 20 million acres of public lands were granted to railroads. In return for land grants, railroads were required to transport government personnel, property, and mail at reduced rates. For the government, there was another advantage. Only a small portion of its 1.5 billion acres of heartland had been sold, even at the giveaway price of $1.25 an acre. According to one senator, the rest of the land could lay there for 500 years if dependable transportation could not be provided. During this period, the locomotive became more than just a mechanical marvel or a powerful machine. It was taking on style and class. Bright-colored engines, prized by the engineer and a builder's delight, came complete with shiny brass trim and elaborate scrollwork. To 19th century Americans, these gaudy wood burners were pretty enough to set in their parlors. Trains had captured the minds of hard-nosed businessmen. Now, they captured the hearts of the people. The rush and roar of a passing train filled spectators with awe and wonder. What boy did not secretly hope to one day become an engineer or a conductor? A distant blast of the whistle could be the call of destiny, a call to adventure, freedom, and new possibilities. Trains were going farther and farther west, and west was the direction young people were told they ought to go. By the middle of the 19th century, America's frontier had stretched well beyond the Mississippi River. And across the continent, the far west was booming. There was cheap farmland in Oregon and gold in California. By 1855, government survey crews had mapped out 5 railroad routes to the Pacific Ocean. By the late 1850s, tracks had crossed the state of Missouri and reached the western frontier. Back east, railroads continued to grow at an astounding rate. The city of Boston had 7 railroads and 7 railroad stations. And on the shore of Lake Michigan, Chicago, a swampy frontier village of 300 in the 1830s, was now served by 11 different railroads, making it the largest rail center in the nation. But as ribbons of iron began to pull the agrarian west closer to the industrial east, the north and south were torn apart by civil war. For the first time, railroads were involved in large-scale warfare. It was a time of frenzied building. and a time of frenzied destruction. Armies supplied by wagons could operate only 100 miles from their base. Any farther, and the teams going and coming would consume the contents of their wagons. Railroads, however, could move troops and supplies at speeds and distances never before possible. Generals on both sides stayed up late, trying to match the rules of war they had learned at West Point with the logistics of the railroad. But between North and South, there were powerful distinctions. The North had nearly 3 times as much track, and its equipment, personnel, and material resources were far superior. The Erie and Pennsylvania railroads alone had more locomotives than all of the Confederacy. And even more critical, the Confederacy did not have factories to build new ones. During the war, events like Andrew's Raid etched railroads into history books. In April 1862, at Big Shanty, Georgia, 20 Union raiders, disguised as civilians, stole a Confederate locomotive. Their objective? Burn bridges and destroy rail between Atlanta and Chattanooga. Led by their conductor, Southern crewmen pursued, on foot, by handcar, and finally by locomotive. Mile after mile, the chase continued. The close pursuit prevented the Union raiders from carrying out their plans. About 20 miles short of Chattanooga, the general ran out of fuel. All 20 raiders were captured. Andrews and 7 others were hanged. In one of the final campaigns of the war, Sherman's March to the Sea, a rail line nearly 500 miles long, supplied over 100,000 troops. Afterwards, General Sherman said that his extensive campaign would have been impossible without the railroad. At the close of the war, a special train left the capital of the reunited States. The same rails that had carried a victorious president to Washington 4 years earlier now guided his body back home to the plains of Illinois. Abraham Lincoln had fought to keep the North and the South united. In 1862, during grave moments of the war, he had signed into law the Pacific Railroad Act. This act provided for the building of the first transcontinental railroad, a railroad that would soon unite the East with the West.